Hello and welcome to the third part in our four-part running series. Today we're going to talk about return to running and all elements of that regarding vMove 2. I'm going to be your host today. I'm Matt Williams, so let's get started. So hopefully by now you've viewed our first two webinars that came out earlier this year. The first of those was how we looked at integrating vMove 2 into our gait analysis. And the second part looked at a bit more of an in-depth running assessment, not just looking at how we can use the vMove 2 software to assess our running, but looking at the whole running mechanism as a whole. The fourth webinar coming up later this year will be looking at how we can use vMove 2 in a performance-based setting, and we've got an interesting test there that we're going to show you all how to do. But today we're going to focus on return to running and how we can use vMove 2 in our decision-making process with our patients so we can confidently get them back running. Now before we move on, I just want to clarify what we mean by vMove 2. There's been a few kind of questions headed our way about, oh, I don't have vMove 2, or when's vMove 2 coming to the US, or when it's coming to Australia. So I just want to clarify that the metrics that we discuss in vMove 2 translate across all Dorsavie products. vMove 2 is known as Professional Suite in the USA. It's exactly the same thing, just it's got a different name. And the Movement Suite platform, which carries the AMI in the USA, has the same metrics. The vMove software, I believe, is just the older version of vMove 2, but in that it still has all the same metrics. So regardless of what you have in the UK, America, or Australia, or anywhere else in the world, you will have these ability to do these tests that we've discussed in the previous two webinars, the webinar coming up, today's webinar, and any previous webinars that we've discussed. Your product name might differ. You might be looking at the Professional Suite or vMove instead of vMove 2. So what are we going to cover in today's webinar? Well, there's going to be, as always, 5 key areas. First of all, we're going to look at the problems. So what are the issues currently surrounding return to running? We're then going to look at the patient's needs. Can we provide a bit more of an understanding of that? We're then going to look at rehab, take a little bit of an in-depth look at how we can use rehab as a tool in our return to running. We're then going to look at testing, and this is then where vMove 2 is going to come in quite nicely. And then finally capping off how we can really utilize the use of vMove 2 to make these decisions. So let's get started by talking about the current problem. Treatment often falls short in preparing patients' return to sport. I think we're all aware of that. We're often really good at treating the injury, but we often forget about the patient. We're fantastic at spending 6 weeks on recovery, building up strength, and so on and so forth. But then when it comes back to return to sport, we realise, we're not quite ready. We focus a little bit too much sometimes on the injury and not the end goal. And as a result, many patients suffer re-injuries, relapses, and sometimes they're exposed to their sport far too soon, and as a result, they fail. Now, not all failures are our fault, but we can definitely stop a large number of them. And I want to share this little case we had. So, a young footballer came to me, it'll be last year now, like 2020. She had an ACL. She was when she came to me, she was probably about 6 or 8 months post surgery. She'd previously been in the hands of another physio, and less than 3 months in her care, she was asked to run. Now, she didn't have full strength. She only just had full range. She was walking okay, but every time she ran, her knee hurt. And this is a prime example of when getting someone back running when they're just not ready. 3 months so less than 3 months post ACL reconstruction is not the right time to run. So when I got hold of this patient eventually, she told me what she was doing. First thing we said is, we're going to stop you running because you are not ready to run. So we need to question ourselves, do we fully understand the injury? Do we fully understand the patient? And do we fully understand the rehab? And hopefully today we can shed some light on these areas. Now, the big thing I want to drill into you today is rehab and return to running starts on day one. That starts the moment that patient walks through your doors. You can already talk about return to running, discharge, even before you've got a diagnosis. So on day one, you need to talk to the athlete. You need to understand them. You want to find out who they are. Everything about them. Not just their age, their gender, their background, everything. How long they've been playing, how long they've been running for. Do they do anything else other side of running? You want to paint a really good picture of them. You also want to understand what type of running they do. Are they a road runner? Are they a cross-country runner? Do they like fell running? Are they long distances, short distances, track? What type is it? Because this is going to help dictate your rehab and also going to help dictate your discharge and return to running criteria. You can't rehab a 100-meter sprinter in the same way you would rehab a marathon runner. There's going to be some crossover, but they are two very, very different things. So you need to understand the type of running that your patient does. You also then need to discuss and understand the level of running. Are they an amateur? Are they elite? Are they someone that just likes to potter out with friends? Are they trying to get better at it? Understand this, because if you can understand their level, you can understand the next point, but you can also understand how much you need to push their rehab. The higher level performers, you need to push them that little bit further. And then finally, what does running mean to you? Or mean to the patient, I should say. This is a really, really big one, because running means different things to different people. It can be kind of that sole kind of stress reliever, anxiety relief. They come home from work, I just want to go and run. And if you're going to take that away from someone, what effect is that going to have on that individual? So you need to understand that person's relationship with running. And if you understand that as well, you're more likely to have some success with it. Once you've kind of discussed that, got a bit more of an understanding, you've painted that picture, you know what running means to the person, you know the type of running they do, distances and events and things they've got lined up, you then want to understand the injury. And this is, I think, the part that we are good at. We just don't connect it with the previous slide and the points we'll discuss in the upcoming slides. But you want to find out what that injury is. We want to discuss kind of and find out what the local impact is, but also what the global impact is. We know when you injure, say, lateral ligament sprain, ACL, hamstring tear, Achilles tendinopathy, it affects structures locally to that injury site, but there is also a global impact. And again, this is probably where we sometimes fall down a little bit. We focus a little bit too much on the local element. We need to look at the global element. Okay, what effect is that ligament sprain having on knee stability, hamstring functionality, hip strength, trunk stability? Same with ACLs. ACLs is, I think we're all familiar with those. You have that local loss of strength and stability and control around the knee, but it has a huge knock-on effect up onto the hip, up into the core as well. So you want to paint this big picture, and this comes in your assessments. Another big thing that I think we should be doing in day one and spending quite a lot of time on doing is set these goals. Set some targets. You want to reiterate to the patient that they will return to run, and there are very, very few injuries out there that when you're presented with them, that you'll go, oh, no, I'm sorry, there's no way you're going to return to run. And let's hope you never have to come across those or have those difficult conversations. But 99% of the things you will see in clinic, you will be able to get them back. So discuss that, and let them set goals, set them realistic goals, but also be a little bit ambitious as well. And if they want to go off and do an Ironman in 2-3 years, set that as a goal and you work that as your long-term goal. If they say, I want to do an Ironman in 6 months' time, and you go, well, that's probably not realistic, bring them back into them. Curb that kind of enthusiasm, but these goals can really help to motivate them all the way along the journey. If they know you're on board with the idea of getting them back running, again, they're going to be so much more compliant and adherent to the treatment. And these goals, set them to be running related, but they don't have to be running related. In the early days, when you're not going to be running, you're not going to have any running related targets. So it might be things like improving the number of calf raises you can do, or the weight you're doing on a squat, but set measurable targets, that you can. In 4 weeks, we want to increase our squat rep max, 5 rep max, from 50 kilos up to 60 kilos, or something that they can visibly see is a nice measure. And use these goals as a nice little progression pathway that they can see from day one all the way to the end that they are making progress. They are moving in the right direction. The patient can see they are definitely getting better. You can also discuss here the discharge criteria. You can sit and chat with the patient and go, these are our goals for the next 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, however long. But we're not going to run until we hit this target, and this target, and you're not being discharged until you hit this, this, and this. And this is really, really good for a couple of things. One, it gives them that patient that objective, and they've got something to focus on, they've got something to motivate themselves on. But it also means they're not going to go rogue. They're not going to go 6 weeks and go, oh, you know what, I am feeling pretty good, I'm feeling pretty strong, I'm going to just go and try and run now. Because you've already discussed, you're not running until you've hit this, 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 and this target, and you're not being discharged until you've done X, Y, and Z. So they're not going to do that, or the chance of that is really reduced down. So on that day when you really want to sit down and talk to the patient, this, what is the injury, what's the local impact, what's the global impact, we're already doing this. To be honest, this takes up very little time of our assessment. It's the understanding of the athlete, finding out who they are, the running and what it means to them, and then setting these goals that you should really kind of spend a little bit more time on. And this helps to build those trusting relationships with the patient. And ultimately, that's going to help us to be successful. The next thing then when we talk about return to running is intervene as early as possible. Don't be afraid. Act whenever you feel comfortable. I'm straight in now on day one. Regardless of what the injury is, I'll find something that I can do. Find something to get them active. Respect the tissue healing times though. Don't be silly and go, okay, well this is 3 days post lateral ligament sprain, we're going to get up and start doing some full weight bearing bilateral movements. They're not going to like that. The tissue's not going to like that. You're going to slow down the recovery. So respect those healing times. That's where you've got to understand the injury a little bit more. But be smart, show off, show why you're better than any other physio or sports therapist or physical therapist that they've been to see. If they've injured the lower body, can they train their upper body? If it's the left side that's injured, can you train the right side? Can you train the hip instead of the knee or the ankle? Really kind of be imaginative and think outside the box. And look at kind of the fitness from day one. Again, one of the things that we fall down on is we often follow this nice kind of rehab pathway, getting them stronger again. But then when it comes back to reintroducing them into the sport, they just don't have the fitness. And then they spend the next 4 weeks getting that fitness back up. And that can be frustrating. But actually we can start kind of training the aerobic and anaerobic systems from day one. One of my favourite things to do with ACL guys or lateral ligament guys is we're lucky enough we've got a nice ski erg machine. If you don't know what it is, it's kind of like a Concept 2 row with 2 handles that you actually ski on. It's a static kind of machine, apart from your arms moving. And in the typical kind of format, you do kind of do a little kind of hinge squat movement. But if you put a chair in there, you can just train the upper body. So it's a really kind of nice thing for the guys that are limited on the lower body side with their injury to sit down, get on the ski erg and do a session on that to help build those aerobic and anaerobic systems. Gives them a bit of a sweat on, and to be honest, that's what most people want. That's why most people fail on rehab, is that it's not intense enough. They want a bit of a sweat, they want to know they've worked hard. So that brings us nicely then on to rehab and the role of rehab in our return to play or return to running cycle. So you can't return to running without rehab. That's plain and simple. We all understand that. We have to understand and respect the healing times, but we can't expect that once those healing times have expired, that they're going to be ready to go back into running. They need that external kind of drive of rehab. Rehab is that kind of preparation. Prepares them, gets them ready, and how we do that is really integral, and we're going to talk about that in the upcoming slides. Don't be afraid to push them, and don't be afraid to progress them. Again, this is something that we often don't do enough of. We don't challenge the patient, and we offer very little in terms of progression. Their body is going to be robust. Even with an injury, it is pretty strong and robust. So show them that. And we find one of the best things to do, and there's going to be a bit of a theme to this today, is talk to the patient, educate them, tell them why you're doing things, what you're doing. This not just builds trust, but the patients begin to understand the need and the reasons for why you're doing things. So then when you prescribe them X number of exercises, they can look at them and go, oh yeah, well this exercise here is working on that they said will be really good for me, this is doing this is doing this, and they know themselves, oh great, this is perfect, I know doing this I'm going to get better. So talk to the patient, really spend time talking to them. So what components do we have in rehab? And we're taking these kind of next few slides, adapting them from a guy, Nick Grantham. He's a SNC coach in the UK. He came up with this brilliant kind of rehab continuum. When I first saw it, I thought, that's amazing. That's what I've been missing in my life. So I've stolen it, I've adapted it a little bit, and I've implemented it into our own practice. So I'd love to take the credit for all this, but actually the credit needs to go to Nick Grantham for this. But in this, we talk about kind of 5 different components of rehab. We'll look at mobility, control, strength, conditioning, and power, and what they each respectively mean. Mobility is improving and restoring movement. Control is building stability. Strength is the ability to generate and control force. Now, whether this is focusing on muscular endurance, muscular strength, absolute, relative strength, or hypertrophy, that's up to you. You need to decide which one the athlete needs. Conditioning is going to build in that functional capacity, something that we don't really do. And then power is like producing maximal force over a short period of time. Again, something we don't really do. We often spend a lot of time focusing on the first 2, mobility, control. We do a little bit of strength work, but actually when we look at it, the strength of what we're doing often isn't adequate. And we don't often dip into the power and conditioning stuff. But all of these 5 components are going to be integral to a person's rehab. And I think part of the reason why we don't often include all 5 of these is we don't know where to place them in our rehab. Which is why Nick came up with this lovely graphic. And again, I've adapted this slightly. And we've got 3 kind of distinct phases to this. We've got our phase 1, restoration, phase 2, reconditioning, and phase 3, preparation. And for 99% of acute injuries, I will follow this pathway. There's a few in there, like an ACL. I'll follow the Melbourne Return to Sport guide instead of this. But any other injury, I will follow this pathway. So phase 1, restoration. This is going to be about restoring mobility, restoring a degree of control, and we can start to introduce some basic strength stuff here. So this is the typical traditional rehab that we all think of, and these are going to be very simple drills. Then we're going to move on to phase 2, which is going to be reconditioning. So we're now going to start to building up that functional capacity. We're then going to also focus a little bit more onto strength now, and control. So mobility, we don't really include mobility stuff in this because we're going to get mobility through our exercises, and that takes a big back seat here. Phase 3, we split this phase into 3 different areas. You've got the return to train, return to play, and return to sport. So return to train would be returning back to the kind of normal training environment. So for a runner, this would be not necessarily returning to running, but returning to all the other elements they do, the S&C stuff, any additional yoga, anything like that they do. The focus here then in the first return to training thing would be strength. That's the primary focus. Moving then onto some power stuff, maybe some light low tolerance drills, maybe some eccentrics, and again we're going to introduce mobility, reintroduce mobility into this phase. In 3B, when we're looking at return to play, this will be where we start to introduce some running. Focus is now very much on power, introducing and reintroducing in a little bit more strength, and then some control work. And then return to sport. Right now, where we're talking into discharge, we're going conditioning as our primary focus, strength and power. And you can see this little graphic at the bottom in terms of the different drills. You've got simple drills, kind of your closed kinetic chain, maybe like single joint movements are going to be kind of your phase 1, phase 2 kind of things, but your more complex, more compound movements are going to be kind of phase 2 all the way up to phase kind of 3C. And this is a really lovely kind of graphic, and I implore kind of any therapist that I have working under me to use this, and it's a really kind of useful tool to help them in that. Once you can understand this and kind of understand what your different focus is each phase, whether it's phase 1, your primary focus is mobility, or phase 3B, that primary focus in return to play is power, you can really help to knuckle down into rehab. Now you'll notice in this, at no point did we discuss timeframes, There's no, right, you're in phase 1 for 4 weeks, then you're in phase 2 for 8 weeks, then phase 3 for 3 weeks. That's completely dependent. And completely dependent on the patient's injury and also how quickly they adapt. And it's not a fluid thing, you don't go from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3A to 3B to 3C. You might go from phase 1 to phase 2, then go into 3A, and then you might go, oh, you know what, we jumped the gun a little bit too soon, let's go back down to phase 2, and so on and so forth. So it's a really nice kind of pathway, but it's just a pathway, it's not a recipe, so you've got to insert your own exercises and drills there where you see fit. So we just mentioned that exercises and drills. Should we be doing exercises or should we be doing drills for return to running? Well, the answer is we should be doing both. The exercises provide the foundation in which drills can be effective, but it's implementing them at the right time. Now, exercises, we know, as we discussed previously, we're going to do these throughout. Phase 1 all the way through to 3C, exercises are in there. But where do we introduce the specific drills? Well, I'd introduce them into your phase 3, 3A all the way through to B and C. If we introduce them too soon, we're not going to have the strength, the mobility, the control, or even the capacity to make these drills effective. So the patient's going to fail on them. So you need to insert them at the right time. So I would tend to primary focus phase 1, phase 2 is exercises and just exercises. Phase 3 we're continuing to focus on exercises, but now we're introducing some drills, and the drills fit nicely under the power sections. So this is kind of where your power, you do your eccentrics, your high impulse training, your jumps, your bounds, those kind of exercises and drills there. So you've had a little bit of introduction then into rehab. What now about actually return to running? We've discussed kind of what you should do on day 1. We've discussed rehab, and you go, great, well, this is fantastic, I can put this into my practice, this is my practice. But we've not actually mentioned return to running, actually how we get them back to return to running. So let's do that now. So you're setting a criteria. Well, setting out a rehab journey is pretty easy. But how do you decide when they're ready to go back to running? Well, we've mentioned it a few times now. First thing you do, you have to respect the healing times. You cannot get a person back to running before the tissue's healed. That was the issue with that first case we introduced you with, the young footballer who less than 3 months post ACLR, her healthcare professionals were getting her back running. That was a big no because yes, she's got a graft in there now, and her ACL is technically fine, but we know that when you've got a graft, that ACL has not been revascularized until at least 3 months. So there's no way you can start running until the ACL is revascularized at that 3-month mark. So you've got to respect that. The next thing you've got to do is test and retest them. Monitor the progress. That will, help you to kind of progress through this little pathway, going from phase 1 to 2 to 3. But it also helps you to monitor their progress. Are they making the improvements you think they should be making? And if they are, you can then move them on. If they're not, you just need to reevaluate. You discussed kind of return to running with them on day 1. That was one of the first things that you said. You said that, okay, we will get you back running. We just need to hit this, and this marker. So this means then that the patient isn't surprised when we're already talking about return to running in the later phases. When we go in and we say, right, in 2 weeks' time, I reckon we can start running. They're not looking at you like a deer in headlights and going, what are we on about? I'm not ready to run. This isn't what I signed up for. I want to carry on doing my squats and my deadlifts for a few more weeks. If we've ingrained the return to running into them and they know when it's coming, they're not going to be surprised. They're not going to display sometimes that hesitation and even fear avoidance that sometimes happens when we spring it on someone. And it's also crucial to remember that return to running isn't discharge. Return to running is just getting them back running. The moment they can run, they still need to go a little bit of a way to rehab. There's that old 80-20 rule. We often rehab people kind of 80% of the way, and then that last 20%, because it takes 80% of the effort to gain that last 20%. People often just drop off because they can run. They might have a little bit of pain and things, but they can run. They can manage that. But sure enough, 6 months down the line, a year down the line, or 3 years down the line, they'll probably hurt themselves again. So we need to push them and into that kind of full rehab, completing that journey. But don't worry about convincing them to do that at this stage, because you've already done that. Because on day one, you talked about, we'll get you running when you hit these targets, and then we'll discharge you when you hit these targets. And again, when we look back at this this rehab kind of criteria, we talked about return to train. We then come back into a normal kind of training gym environment. Return to play would then be then starting to run again, and return to sport would be then that full immersion into running. So none of this is a surprise to them. So what tests are we going to do? Well, there are a whole heap of tests you can do, and you've got to select tests that are suitable for the individual, and also suitable for their sport, their different type of running. So these are just some of the ones that I really like and implement. So you've got your squat and your single leg squat tests. These are kind of functional alignment tests to make sure that valgus varus is okay, and it'd be no shock to you that that's going to be where the VMove 2 really sits in there. You've got your single leg rise tests. We know from research this is a really good demonstration of knee health, but also a great kind of compound movement. Side plank, great for that anti-rotation. We know we need that anti-rotation at the trunk and running, so it's a great kind of display of that strength there. You've got your calf raise and hamstring bridge tests. These are capacity tests, and we all know the importance of the calf and the hamstring in running. The calf deals out a huge amount of force, and the hamstring is critical not just in acceleration but deceleration. And then you've got your leg press or weighted squat, and these are great kind of tests to replicate the forces that the body's going to see, that 1.5 times your body weight. And you'll see in each of these we've set out kind of what the minimum should be, what the target should be, and also kind of what we want to hit that 5 to 10% difference. So single leg rise, you want to be hitting at least 10. Ideally it's 22. Side plank is a minimum of 30 seconds, ideally with a 60 seconds. Calf raise 25, and as we discussed in the previous webinar on running assessments, you actually want to be looking at calf raises as a result for age range and also gender, different for males and females. Leg press and weighted squat, minimum you want to be doing 1.5 times your body weight, but at least kind of target wise 1.8 times your body weight. And I know that sounds a lot, but actually if you've got the ability to do it, go and try it in the gym, and you will surprise yourself. And remember as well, these are 1 rep maxes. It's not asking you to do it times 10. It's just a 1 rep max. And then finally got that hamstring bridge, minimum of 20, target 25. And then with all of these ones, which are kind of unilateral tests, you want a 5 to 10% difference on the other side. But additionally, you've got kind of the balance test as well, and we know the importance of balance in running. And its role is a good kind of predictor of running performance, but also running injuries. So you've got your typical single leg balance test. You want a 45 seconds there with a 5-10% difference. You've got your Y balance test, where you kind of make that Y shape going forward, posteriorly off to the right hand side and then to the left hand side as well, making that, funny enough, that Y shape. And then you've got the dynamic balance, where you're in that single leg balance position and you move your head in certain directions. Really good test to use. And then you've got your hop test as well. So you've got your just your hopping on the spot. You've got your hop for distance. Sorry, that should be not hopping on your spot. Sorry about that. You've got your triple hop, so 1 hop after the other. You've got a crossover hop where you hop from the left hand side over to the right and then back again, 3 hops. And you've got a side hop, kind of a 30-second, just a lateral hop. And again, with these, you want to be kind of looking at least level with your pre-injury score. If you don't have that, you want 5 to 10% difference compared to your uninjured side. And as a general rule of thumb, if I don't have a pre-injury score, I would base the target on the uninjured side, but then I'd add at least 20%. purely from the basis of I'm going to go under the impression and that the uninjured side has been a little bit deconditioned during the rehab, so it's not going to be performing well. And particularly if this is a test you've never done before, I'm not going to take the uninjured side's results as gospel. I'm going to add a little bit more to that. And worst case scenario, they're just better than what they would have been. Now, it's important as well to note that you're never going to do all of these tests. There are 14 tests here. You're not going to do all of them. You're going to cherry pick a few and do a few of them. And, I mean, looking at these hops here, if my runner doesn't turn around corners, I'm not doing any lateral movements, any lateral hops with them. So I probably just focus on the triple hop. Equally, if I can't justify that need for dynamic balance, I'm not going to look at dynamic balance, Y balance test. I'm probably just going to look at a single leg balance test. But these tests also, you can do them at different points. The functional alignment test you might do really early on. That might be kind of in your phase 1, phase 2 of your rehab. Then you might move on to your weighted stuff and kind of that phase 2, phase 3, and then you look at your jumps in kind of that phase 3B, 3C as you're getting completely back ready to running. And I always kind of stick that into your head, it's, can they move well first? Then have they got the capacity? Have they got the strength? Then you can look at jumps and get them back running. It's a simple kind of step-by-step process. There is also a missing link to testing, something that we don't often talk about, don't really discuss, and that's psychosocial elements. Does the athlete, patient think they are ready to return? Regardless of what we think, regardless of how they perform, does the athlete think they're ready? So ask them, do you think they're ready? Do they have any fears or concerns about that? And this is where patient-reported outcomes can come in quite handy, because often an athlete will tell you one thing, but is quite happy to write something else on a piece of paper. And they might tell you, no, I've got no worries. But when you get them to fill out a reported outcome, you look at it and they go, they're not okay. They're scared to death of running. And there's some really good ones out there. There's obviously some injury-specific ones, things like the knee outcome scores, Oxford hip scores, knee scores, Hagos IOT33s, loads of ones out there. But one I think is really kind of nice and generic one for kind of fear and return to sport is the Tampa scale, Tampa kinesiophobia scale. But I love as well doing a thing called a pre-mortem. This is something from David Joyce. He's an Australian physio. If you ever get a chance to hear him speak about this, do, because it's amazing and it is a game changer. And it's quite simple, you sit the athlete down, kind of probably in that phase 3B, 3C, so they're back training at least, and their discharge is coming up in the next few weeks. And you sit them and go, right, how do you think your rehab's gone? They tell you it's gone great, it's gone bad, or whatever. This is their opportunity as well to slag you off if they don't like you. So just bear that in mind. And then you go, right, I want to imagine get you into a real deep dark corner now, you're back running, and then 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, bang, you're injured again. Exactly the same thing happens. Is there anything you could have done differently? And what you want is the answer, no. I think I've done everything absolutely right. If I get injured again, it's just one of those things. It's just unfortunate. But most of the time you're going to get, I'd like to have spent a little bit more time doing these drills, or when we did those jumps a few weeks ago, I think I could have done better in the triple hop, or I don't think I was good enough at the single leg rise test. So you get some good kind of insight then from the athlete. How did they think they can perform? And then you can do one of two things. Don't ignore it, but you can sit with them and you can discuss them. You go, okay, you said there about your triple hop, you think you could have done better at them, but actually you look at it, you did really, really well at them. Or the single leg rise, you thought your stability was a bit off. Actually, it wasn't. We've got the video here, we've got the VMove 2 data. Your stability was absolutely on point. Or it opens up your eyes and you go, oh yeah, you know what? The stability wasn't that great on that. Maybe we got a little bit ahead of ourselves, or they probably could have done better on the hops. Let's extend the rehab a little bit. Let's go a little 2 weeks longer, or 3 weeks longer, or however long you want, just to make those hit those marks. So it's a really kind of good, nice thing, and something I implore to do with everyone, not just athletes. Even if they're just an amateur, couch to 5k, running for first time, do them, because you'll get a real good insight into what the athlete's thinking, what the patient's thinking. Okay, so now we come to the part of the webinar where we should probably start talking about the vMove 2 software and how we can integrate that. I'm going to reiterate the point from earlier, the vMove 2, the metrics we discuss are available across all kind of Dorsey products, the Professional Suite, the AMI and vMove. So we know that the vMove 2, and it's obviously a respective partners, such they will provide an in-depth analysis of these tests. So we're going to understand the movements at a much, much deeper level. But which modules are we going to use? Are we going to look at the knee? Are we going to look at the run module? Or are we going to look at the lower back one? We might be tempted to say, well, let's look at the run, because we want to get them to return to running, so we want to see how well they run. And actually I'm going to say no, because the running module is a great assessment for running, but it is an assessment for running patterns. It is not an assessment for determining if someone is ready to run. If we look back at those tests we discussed earlier, the functional alignment test, the capacity test, the strength test, the jumps, at no point in that did we discuss actually running. We're looking at kind of more metric-based movement things. And for that kind of basis, we're not going to look at the low back either. The low back's got some great useful tools in it, good kind of range of motion breakdown, and the live training tool is really kind of good for teaching technique and positioning of lower back and pelvic during movements. But it's not going to give me the information I need in the test that I want to do. So surprise, surprise, if I want to do a functional alignment test, I can squat, single leg squat. If I want to do weighted squats, if I want to look at some jumps, I'm going to look at the knee module, because that's what the knee module does. But I'm going to be smart about how I'm going to do it. I'm not just going to look at body weight squats. I'm not just going to look at hopping on the spot. I'm going to add weight to the squats, because I know that's one of my tests. One of my tests is going to be a weighted squat to at least 1.5 times the body weight. So I wanted to see how they perform with weight. I'm going to do some jumps with distance, because again, jumping with distance is part of my testing criteria. And equally, we touched on this briefly, we don't have to do these tests right at the end. We don't have to do these tests in phase 3B or 3C of the rehab, where we're looking at return to running and return to discharge. And discharge. We can do them throughout, where we're looking at kind of those functional alignment, the squat, single leg squat tests. We might do those, let's say in phase 1, phase 2, where our focus is a little bit more on control. And then we're going to add some weight into it when we start adding weight into the movement in that phase 2, phase 3 phase of rehab. So use your vMove 2 in your test along your rehab journey. And something, I've got quite a reputation for this at work. Be honest to your patient. If they've done well, tell them they've done well. If they haven't done well, tell them they haven't done well. Don't butter it up for them, because at the end of the day, what's the benefit of it? If you tell your patient, oh, that was really, 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 really good, that was fantastic, but they only got 0.5 of their body weight in a weighted squat, they're still miles off. Now, encourage them, definitely encourage them. Don't be harsh and brutal to them, but be honest to them. If they still have things to improve on, tell them they still have things to improve on. If you hold their hand all the time, they're not going to take that initiative to progress. So I'm always going to assess a squat, a single leg squat, and the jumps. But are there any exemptions? Well, the answer is no, but the answer is also yes. Everyone should be doing the squat, single leg squat, and jumps as their return to running test. However, if I'm presented with a patient that has never done these movement patterns before, has never done a squat, never done a single leg squat, has never jumped before in this kind of testing parameter, they've got a really kind of short recovery. They've got an injury that is of low impact or severity, that in 4 weeks' time is going to be fine. I know I'm going to be spending more than 4 weeks or so teaching them how to squat, single leg squat, and jump effectively, where I can actually be spending that time rehabbing them, actually getting them better. So if I've got someone that meets those criteria, that has never done the movement patterns before, has a really short recovery, and has injuries of low impact or severity, I'm not going to necessarily do these tests. However, as a trade-off, I put more emphasis on the other tests. I make sure that we hit, it might be the balance test, the side plank, the bridges, the calf raises, whatever it is in there. It might be that the leg press. That's going to be a bit easier than doing a weighted squat. But I also make it clear that these three things, the squats, the single leg squats and jumps, we are not going to ignore. We are going to work at doing them, and these are going to be our long-term goals. So it might be 8 weeks or 12 weeks after kind of the initial injury, it might be kind of 8 weeks post-discharge, that I still want to monitor and do this, because it is going to make the athlete better, or the patient better, by doing these. But in that initial recovery, it just might not be suitable to do them, because you don't want to switch focus and just focus on, I'm gonna have to teach old Doris here how to do a squat. She's never done a squat before, and that's going to take me about 3 weeks, but her rehab should only be 2 weeks' time. Don't waste your time, but don't trade off. Put more emphasis on other tests and make these long-term goals. And again, theme of the day, discuss this with the patient so they're on board with that. They know that squats, single leg squats and jumps are important, but you're not going to do them because of the time constraints you've got. But as a long-term goal, that's what you're going to work towards. Right, so now we're going to talk about a case. What we've got here is a 40-year-old male who had a meniscal injury and looking at return to running. So simple as that. We've done quite a bit of the rehab already. We've gone through phase 1, 2 and 3, part of phase 3. So we're looking at now, getting on the cusp of phase 3A to 3B. And is this person ready to run? So as we go through this data, we'll also talk about some of the norms of the data. So we've got the squat here. And this squat, I should mention, this is a weighted squat. I can't remember exactly the weight on it, but it was at the 1.5 times the body weight. The single leg squat is a single leg riser from a seated position, coming up and down, up and down. And then we'll get onto jumps. We'll just talk about those in a second. So looking at the squat, we've got the left and then we've got the right. So the injury was to the left knee. And what we can see here, we've got an average of a 5-degree valgus. And we can see on a little slider, we've got a nice little green lollipop pointing out that average of 5 degrees. And we've got our 5 reps there as well. But they're quite spread out. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Are a little bit all over the place compared to the right leg, where we've got a less of a valgus, a 3 degrees, still in the green, but those reps seem to be a little bit closer together. And with this kind of our norm, we want to be hitting that green lollipop. We want to be kind of around less than 5 degree valgus, and this slider infographic is perfect for that. Anyone can look at that and go straight away, green means good, squat is okay. The next come along, we've got the kind of valgus varus speed. So this is effectively the control, how quickly they fall into this valgus and varus. And as a norm, we want to be looking kind of around 15 to 20 degrees per second. That's kind of your maximum. Ideally, you want to be less than 10, but 15 to 20 is more than adequate. And again, we can see here, we've got 14 degrees per second and 10 degrees per second. Tibial inclination, so this is effectively the ankle movement, the dorsiflexion. You want between 20 to 40 degrees here, and we've got here 27 and 29. So there's a 2 degree difference, but it is only 2 degrees. And just remember that, we're talking about differences actually way up. How big is the difference? 2 degrees isn't a massive difference. So we look at the squats, and just as an overview, the left valgus is right on the edge. It's a little bit wayward. There's seems to be elements of fatigue or lack of control. Kind of reps 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are vastly different. Control is okay. We're kind of smack bang in the middle of where we want to be, and ankle movement is good. So I'm relatively happy with that. We then go on to the single leg squat. Now we only did 3 reps of this, probably because of the space that's on the slide available to, but I would employ you to do more than 3 reps. So let's start with the left leg. That green lollipop has now been replaced with an orange lollipop. We've got a valgus of 8 degrees, and we've also got a varus now of 5 degrees, which indicates that we are going a little bit all over the place here. And we can see that from the rep numbers underneath the sliders, the 1, 2, and 3. The first rep was kind of right on the border of the green to amber. On the valgus side of things, the second rep was all the way over on the varus side of things, and the third rep was right up almost towards the red side of things. So we're all over the place. The control has reduced massively, or increased massively, I should say, in degrees per second. We've gone from 14 to 26 degrees per second. Now you will always see an increase in this because you're going from 2 legs to 1 leg, but you don't want to see big jumps. So 26 degrees per second, that's not good. We don't have a lot of control there. And then we've got tibial inclination now. That's reduced, and again you are going to see a reduction. It's unlikely you're going to see the same number in the squat as you are in the single leg squat, but here we've got 15 degrees. So to me that's indicating that this individual is just doing a very shallow movement. We compare that to the right, and the right is almost perfect, and we've got a 5 degree valgus, so we're right on the edge of the of what is good, but we can see 1, 2, and 3 reps are perfect. They're all together. The control 18 degrees per second, so again an increase, but we still fit in that norm. And tibial inclination 20 degrees, so it's decreased, but we are still within that norm. So for me, squats are okay. Squats are good actually. The left, we could have a little bit of more work on that, but the single leg squats aren't good. So me right now, I've already made my decision. Okay, but let's talk about the jumps anyway. They're still important. So for this, we did 3 single jumps forward distance. So did a jump, measure the distance, go back to start, measure them, so on and so forth. Again, let's start with the left leg. This is the injured leg. You can see here reps 1, 2, 3. They're kind of nicely bunched together, but they're all bunched together right at the end of that starting scale. So we've got a nice big 10 degree valgus there. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that's too much. If we look at the valgus varus in the loading phase, so as it's getting ready into the jump, 25 degrees per second, so it's okay. It's not great. It's higher than we want it to be. And then we've got a tibial inclination about 13 degrees. So again, we're going very shallow. But also then bear in mind what your instructions are with this. So I told the individual here to kind of sink in a little bit, but not too much. So I'm not going to see a big number with this. I'm going to see kind of the bottom end of 20. If I told the individual to go into a full kind of single leg squat and then jump, I'd want to see a much bigger number. On the landing, we got 71 degrees per second. This number is always going to be much higher. It's going to be outside of the 15 to 20 degrees per second. So just bear that in mind when you look at it, but you still want it to be relatively small. But again, look at kind of what it is that you, how you instruct them. If I instruct the individual to, when they land, take time, raise up, that number is going to be really high. What I told this individual was to sink in and then almost kind of come up almost immediately. So 71 degrees per second is too high. And we look at tibial inclination there, 15 degrees per second. We're not really landing with a bent knee. We want that bent knee landing. You will get a flight time recording, but I'm not interested in that at this point. It was more of a movement thing, so I've not included it. But flight time is quite a nice thing if you want to look at distance, either just a vertical or horizontal hop, and you can obviously compare those. So we look at the right side. Now, the right side was a bit of a surprise because actually the right side wasn't great itself. We've now dipped outside of the green. We've got a 6 degree valgus, and again, bit hunched. Those numbers are together, but they're together in the wrong section of the scale. The loading valgus varus degrees per second is okay. It's good. Top end of what we want. Tibial inclination is good. Bottom end of what we want there. The landing 48 degrees. That's a little bit more what I was hoping for. Kind of around that 30 to 40 mark. And tibial inclination 26 degrees. Okay, good. Probably sinking a little bit too much into that. But I'm not going to, with this individual, I'm not going to kind of delve too deeply into that because, like I said, I've already made my mind up before we came onto the hops that we're not returning to running. And I've already spoiled that for you. Is this person ready to run? The answer is no. Squats were okay, a little bit of reduced fatigue kind of in the squats, but single leg squats weren't great at all, and the hops were pretty bad. So I can't justify going into running. So what we did then, we spent another 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, we spent working on improving that. So we went back into the training, stayed in that phase 3 of rehab, where we're looking at kind of strength, power, mobility stuff, putting a lot of emphasis on those strength and power stuff, because that's kind of where we fell down with the with jumps in particular. So what happened? So 4 weeks later we did the test again, and you can see straight away it looks pretty damn good. Squats, same squats, same weight as well, so exactly the same weight. We're up to 1.5 times your body weight, and we've got nice even numbers that are all bunched together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the left and the right are all close together, and that's what we want. We don't want any rogue numbers going off to the left or to the right. They're all close together, and we've got an average of 3 and 2 degrees valgus. That's nice, really, really nice. We look at the valgus varus degrees per second, 10 and 9 degrees, perfect, amazing. That's super controlled. I'm ecstatic about that. Tibial inclination, we got 29 degrees and 30 degrees, perfect. That was already good from the previous one, so a little bit of improvement there, fantastic. I'm happy with that. Single leg squat, I love this, really, really like this. So again, we've only done 3 reps because of the space on the chart, but we've got a 5 degree and a 3 degree valgus here. Again, the numbers are bunched together quite nicely, 1, 2, 3, so we're not playing that kind of fatigue reduced control. The valgus varus degrees per second, 19 and 14 degrees per second, perfect, amazing. And tibial inclination, we've got 24 and 25 degrees, brilliant. So we've ticked the boxes, we've got control. We've got control in that valgus varus, we've got mobility with the tibial inclination, we've got the control with the valgus as well, and we've also got the strength because we're doing it with 1.5 times body weight. Single leg squats, we've got the strength there, we've got the mobility, and we've got the control. So I'm really, really happy now. This is perfect. And the jumps equally as good. 5 and 4 degrees valgus there. So the left one, yeah, we're on that little cusp of things, and there's a little bit of a decline there on the left. You can see kind of the first rep very much in the green, second rep smack bang on that average, the third rep we kind of dip over a little bit, and the right hand side 1, 2, 3 again a little bit further apart. So this indicates to me I probably want to spend a little bit more time on this going forward. But then the numbers on the right hand side, the valgus varus degrees per second, 20 and 18 degrees on the left and the right in the loading phase, and then 41 degrees on both during the landing phase is perfect. Really, really happy with that. And the tibial inclination, 22 and 24 degrees on the landing phase, the loading phase, sorry, and then 18 degrees on the landing phase. Perfect. Again, brilliant. This is everything I wanted to see, because this now has built me with confidence that this person is ready to return to running. We can start introducing them back into running. And I should point out to say that on top of this, we did the side plank test, we did the single leg balance test, we did the calf raise test, and the hamstring test as well. And we also did, just because we got it and the individual wanted to have a little play on it as well, we did a leg press, single leg press as well, 1 rep max on that. So we did a whole heap of tests, and all of them passed with flying colours. But we can see here, spending 4 more weeks working on the rehab, we saw some amazing improvements. We just mentioned there that I probably want to spend a little bit more time in the hops, but I know going forward into phase kind of 3, B and C of the rehab, I'm gonna have the ability to do that. So I've got the confidence here that the individual can return to running and isn't going to suffer. Whereas before, if I did it after their first lot of test results, the chances were that we would have hit some kind of a bump in the road. So, to summarise kind of what we've done today, hopefully we've kind of discussed, and hopefully you guys have taken home kind of what some of the problems were with return to running, kind of not understanding the patient's needs. We've obviously then discussed kind of the patient needs a little bit better. We talked about how we can use rehab, and we introduced you to that lovely kind of rehab phase kind of continuum, adapted from the stuff from Nick Grantham. And if you take anything away, take that away. Implement that into your practice, and you can thank me later. It's an amazing tool to use. We talked about the role of testing, different tests you can do. We talked about the 14 different tests and the different markers there are for those tests. And then we also discussed right at the end kind of the using vMove 2 into your practice and help you to make those decisions. So hopefully from today you've got a nice good understanding of the different things you can do to help make those decisions in terms of return to running. So that concludes our third part of the webinar of this running series, talking about vMove 2 in relation to running. Coming up later in the year, we're going to be talking about vMove 2 in performance, and what we've got is a nice little test that we've run on a few people, and we're going to share that with you, and how you can kind of take your running assessment and give it a bit more pizzazz. Really kind of take it above and beyond what any other running assessments are doing out there. So we've got that to look forward to in the coming months. But as always, if you've got any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or to Kerry and Joe at Dorsa V. Thank you for listening, and I will look forward to speaking to you all guys in the future.